Hello and welcome to This Naked Chat, a podcast where six friends from different walks of life come together for honest, unscripted conversations about living alcohol-free and everything that comes with it. We all met at a live event hosted by Annie Grace of This Naked Mind in March of 2024. What started as a mastermind group with the six of us and Annie turned into some really deep friendships, filled with connection, tough conversations, and a lot of laughter. And after a year of growing and learning together, we realized that these conversations might help more than just us. So here we are, no scripts, just real talk. We are incredibly grateful to Annie and This Naked Mind for helping us get this off the ground and for the impact that her work has had on each of our lives. I am Brian, and I am joined by Kori, Agnes, Judi, Jenie, and Sammie. Let's dive in. Let's see. Okay, so here's the hat, and this is the idea. It really didn't take that long to cut these up, but I did. All right, so here's today's topic. Books we are reading or books we like.
Ooh, that's a good one.
How's that?
This just arrived in the post.
Well, there you go.
An hour ago.
What do you guys tend to like in terms of just reading?
In general?
Yeah.
I'm a fiction gal, and I like someone who can write a sentence that is a well-written sentence. So I'm kind of an obnoxiously huge Stephen King fan because he can write a sentence and tell a story. And I like Kate Atkinson a lot. I like Marilynne Robinson. Actually, can I off-ramp and talk a little bit about one of her books that's
Sure.
relevant?
Can I ask you a question before you start? What is a good sentence? What does that mean? Because I've never been an English person, so I don't understand what a good sentence means.
It's another one of those where you know it when you read it, and in the middle of this, it's not extraneous information. It's not useless to the story, and it makes you feel something inside, maybe. This is on the fly, where I think that's so important in fiction writing and in playwriting especially. It's not so hard to write a good paragraph. I think it's a huge challenge to write good dialogue that sounds like you can hear it out loud in your head versus kind of stilted dialogue that you're just kind of skimming through it because there's nothing there for you.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, you feel something and it just somehow is relatable. It like makes sense to you. Then you don't have to overthink it.
Exactly.
Is how I interpreted it.
It might resonate with you enough that 4 hours later, that sentence has prompted other thoughts downstream. That to me is a well-written sentence. So Marilynne Robinson is an interesting creature because she's a theologian and philosopher by education. And she's on faculty at the Iowa Writers Workshop, which is a
Go Hawks!
Is a premier MFA writing program in the country that I really wanted to go to for a while. I was going to use that as I'm tired of medical school, I don't want to go to work yet plan. But that didn't happen. Anyway, some years ago, she wrote this incredible book called Gilead. She writes a lot of nonfiction, but this is fiction, and it is set in a fictional town in Iowa. And we meet a grandfatherly fellow who grandfatherly aged, but at a very elderly age. And when he's actually not very physically healthy, he has fathered a son. And Gilead is a series of letters he composes to his son because he wants his son to have some understanding of who he is, because he knows he's going to die well before his son is an adult. And contained in these letters are these theological debates he has with his best friend, who is totally on the opposite spectrum of all systems of belief compared with our hero. And it's just, it's short, but it's dense and thoughtful and lovely conversationally written. And I can't say enough good about it. From that spawned a couple other novels that focused on other characters within the story of Gilead. They're okay, but Gilead is just a premier read to me. One of my favorite books of all time. So I read fiction a lot, and nonfiction stuff. I, because of coaching and everything, have tempted now to try to stay focused in the world of neuroscience, neuropsychology. Not so much about addiction anymore, although that was true in the beginning, so not so much in the way of quit lit. But yeah, and audiobooks are helpful because they're convenient, but I still really want to hold a book in my hand.
Yeah.
Another one that makes my top 5 of all time and is more recent for me than Gilead a couple of years ago is a book called Demon Copperhead.
Yep, that's great.
Barbara Kingsolver. It's an extraordinary, again, fiction, but an extraordinary portrayal of poverty, addiction, trauma, and it's just brilliant. And if you can, that's an audiobook that's really well done. The narrator is awesome.
Sammie, do you have any before you got the one that's currently sitting by you?
Well, I'm currently listening on Audible to Inner Consciousness by Sadhguru, because I just think he just makes me smile. He's just like some, old dude who's just really good at narrating what he says. I just think it's really good, and it's quite nice to hear somebody speak quite bluntly and not kind of, you kind of I expected it to be more carefully worded, if you like, in terms of how he talks about things, but it's quite refreshing that he's just, his history is fascinating, going across the world on a motorbike and things like that, and then so that's kind of what I'm listening to at the minute. And then I got my new one, so I struggle with just sticking to one. I've also got there's another one about a yogi. I can't think what it's called now on audio. So as always with my brain, I have about 3 or 4 things on the go at once. But I did just read, because I went away for 3 weeks, a complete fictional book, which I haven't done for about 5 years, to just read a book which my daughter bought, and it was called How to Kill Men and Get Away with It. And it was fabulous.
That's not very nice, Sammie.
And it was kind of based on, there's a program over here called Made in Chelsea, so it's like, sort of footballers' wives and things, and then that alongside the some of the sort of the movements, that were going on. She kind of combined the two, and I mean, she's at the end, she sort of thanks everyone and mentions her young kids and says, but you won't be reading it for a number of years because it's quite graphic. It's she doesn't mess about. It was fun.
So Sammie, you tend to stay in nonfiction type stuff?
I have done for the last few years. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact, I think really when I first started doing all of this sort of work, it was almost like a new addiction almost. It was just reading, listening, just trying to, to the point where I was like, oh my gosh, I need to try and actually stop trying to absorb so much at once.
And I wonder if that, like from an audiobook standpoint, helps in some of the, what would you classify everything as, like a self-help type nonfiction, or what that would be, like the neuroscience type stuff that Jenie mentioned. Like I got deep into that too, but I have a problem with, getting past more than like 5 to 10 pages without going, what's going on with my head? That's where I have to definitely go into and I've gotten way into the sci-fi fantasy world. Although I did, Jenie, I just started The Stand the kind of redone
wow.
Stephen King.
Oh my gosh, I read that when I was about 12.
So I had never read any Stephen King. So, but I mean, that's how my balance tends to be like that. Like I might have some sort of a tough, like I was reading that Presence Process, and I just couldn't help myself but be like, can we just get to the process versus telling me, you know, and I'm sure it's wonderful. I still have not gotten to it though, because he explains how to get to the process. And I'm like, well, what's the process? You know?
You're allowed to skip ahead, you know.
He tells me I can't.
Oh, man.
I know. I don't know. But I mean, that's how I always tend to have both of them going, but I very rarely pick up anymore. And to your point, like Jenny, it used to be like the quit lit type stuff, but you know, we kind of understand a lot of that world now. So to find something new out there.
And I think you can get saturated a little bit too, right? I mean, I should not say you. I think I know I can get a little oversaturated and oversteeped in that stuff. So I need a brain break a bit.
Agnes, what are you into?
I've always been nonfiction. So for me, it's always been business books or self-help. That's really it. Because as an entrepreneur for all these years, it's like, okay, how do I do this? How do I manage people? How do I make money? How do I do, like, it's always been that. So I've never gone into the fiction. And I was actually thinking about that recently because I'm like, oh, I think I might explore that a little bit. Because the other one just feels a lot and heavy where, you know, I don't even know what I would start with. I don't like anything gruesome. I don't like killings. I don't like that kind of stuff. So I'm not gonna read How to Kill a Man.
Marion Keyes is really good.
Read Gilead. You might really jive on.
Yeah, I wrote it down.
Of the theology aspect, that might really be cool for you, and it's short.
Yeah.
I wish I had to Jenny's point about like a good sentence. Stephen King in the preface to The Stand writes about how someone asked him like, will this become a movie? And I'm sure it has by now, maybe. But one thing I find interesting about the fiction world is like I can read some of the gory stuff. Like I did the Hunger Games type stuff, and I can read it, and your own mind will come up with the characters and the story and stuff. So then when I went to go watch the movies, I actually couldn't because I'm like, my mind probably gave me what I could handle on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if I saw it on TV or on the screen, I'm like, no, that's not the way I had it in my head. And that's what Stephen King mentions that in his book. He's like, I like them to stay in the book form because then you can create that story of how you envision my writing to be. And I'm like, that's so cool.
Yeah.
You know, that's how I found the fiction. Because I was with you, Agnes. It was always business and self-help.
That point about, you know, translating a book into a visual medium, that's such a good point. Because I'll read Stephen King till the cows come home, but I don't like seeing the films. I
could not watch it.
And mostly because not many of them have been done well, in my opinion, compared to the books.
See, I think the films are brilliant. I read all the books when I was about 12. The only author I read was Stephen King for years, and I actually thought they did a lot of his films really well. What's the one with Kathy Burke? Misery.
Oh, gosh.
Misery is brilliant. Yeah.
Carrie.
I didn't like it. Oh, I tried.
The Shining.
It was The
Shining's a classic horror film. Yeah. So I thought, but it's
and then there's actually, I should probably revise what I just said because Stand By Me is one of his novellas, and that's a fabulous film. And of course, Shawshank Redemption can't be beat. So, all right, Sammie, you're right. I retract what I said.
The other ones that I love to read is autobiographies.
Oh, good one.
That I really, really enjoy reading that just to see somebody's life perspective, like their perspective on their own lives and what they've gone through and stuff like that. I find those really interesting.
What's your favorite recently or ever?
Well, I have the Matthew Perry one that I haven't started, so I want to read that one. So that's my next one.
That's a perfect transition, because I think, so when we think back to, like when we were either attempting to stop drinking or like any sort of life transition, I find things like that, like Matthew Perry I've had recommended. I've had the Andre Agassi book even recently of like when you read about people's lives to kind of realize that all of these paths are a little similar, right? Like that we all kind of go through this same sort of thing. And that's where I was wondering if, from a nonfiction standpoint, was there anything out there? Obviously, This Naked Mind by Annie Grace, one of our amazing sponsors. But was there anything that stood out to you from a health kind of that world?
I mean, I read the Matthew Perry one, and it is brilliant. How he was alive as
right
with his opiate addiction. Really, is just. I mean, his stomach literally exploded. It's just crazy.
Yeah, I don't know about. Well, I haven't read it, so once I read it, I'll let you know. But any other ones, I just feel like when you're able to relate to it, like it just makes you feel like, oh, you're not alone. Like there's just, again, something about being vulnerable. I guess that's really what it is. That makes you feel you just learn from them, whatever it is that you need to learn at that point, whatever that lesson is. If you're looking, and whatever kind of support, I guess you're looking for at that point too. If it's, again, not to feel alone, that, oh, someone else, they were able to get through it. Oh, I could do it. Or how they did it, because there's no one way for anybody. So it's like, you gotta try out all these different things, right? Like they have thousands of books on like weight loss and stuff like that, which that's what Kori could have talked about, right? But again, it's like, you got to read them all. And when you read somebody's story, then I just feel like, for me, it's like, okay, I will try this. Or, if it worked for them, maybe it'll work for me. I don't know. There's just something about it that I really enjoy.
Because it's easy to just look at people and think that, oh, their life's really easy and they've got everything. And most people have had a struggle, and have spent a long time working through stuff to get to the bit that the public see.
A favorite of mine from early days, and sorry not to look at you guys, but I couldn't come up with her last name. And now I have. This is published, it's almost 30 years ago now, God help me, but it's still pretty great, in part because it's written by a journalist. A book called Drinking: A Love Story. Some of you might know it. It's written by a gal called Carolyn Knapp, and she lived in Boston and was a journalist, and goes through her 20-year plus history of heavy drinking, and how she came out the other side, and childhood trauma, and all of it. But it's really well written. So that was a favorite of mine.
Do you think, I think too, what Agnes said there too about one of the reasons why we might read this is because we are looking for something like a different path, because something's not working for us, right? So I wonder how it corresponds to, whether you're reading a book to find some different paths, or you're choosing like a coach, right? Like each person tends to have their own sort of, let's find what works for you, right? That's how I probably don't read as much now from the self-help type stuff, because I do have coaches that I can reach out to on particular areas, right? Like even Kori from a nutrition standpoint, to be like, hey, I'm struggling with this. What have you seen with other clients that might work for me? Something like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I also see it as, like, my perspective is that, again, even when it comes to the fiction books, it's whatever your looking for or you want to explore, but you don't want anyone to know you're exploring it, right? Then
Yeah.
you're
Like my dragon sex books that I read. Yeah, right. I'm like, what?
50 Shades of Grey.
But that's what I mean. And people would cover they talk about it all the time. They're covering it because it's like, I don't want someone to see me reading this. Right? So I think it's like, this is where that you're exploring all this. And then once you figure things out, then that's where it's like, okay, you're going to go do that program, or you're going to get that coach, or you're going to do something else. Yeah. But it's a great way to sort of get a feel for something that you're not even sure what it is.
Yeah.
So I got to figure out, what do I want to explore? Because that's the book I'm going to read.
Well, I read a book, I think it's either the Tay of Pooh and the Tower of Piglet, or something. Like, have you? Yep. Like, I read that years ago just because I like Winnie the Pooh and Piglet. That was kind of, you know, one of my best friends at school was absolutely crazy about Winnie the Pooh. So I was like, oh, that's a cool book. I'm going to read that. Not really knowing what I was reading, but actually, it's a fabulous book.
It is so good.
That's an adult book, or is that a kid's?
It is.
Yeah.
It's the Tao of Pooh, and it basically looks at, well, Sammie, you can say, I shouldn't step on you.
Well, no, you go. I mean, it was years ago I read it, but it is. I didn't realise when I was reading it that it was going to be that sort of journey, but it is, like, you know, obviously the different the Pooh versus, like, not versus, but the differences between them in terms of the Tao and the Tay.
And it's what it is explaining precepts of ancient wisdom, especially Eastern traditions like Buddhism and such, through the stories of A.A. Milne with Pooh and Piglet, especially, but all the characters. And it's brilliant. And it takes some of Milne's actual Pooh stories and says, okay, well, here's some Buddhist principles that come through here. And it's light and not, you know, academically dense. And consequently, you tend to remember some things from it. Yeah, it's a fabulous book.
This episode is sponsored by This Naked Mind, a revolutionary approach to changing your relationship with alcohol. When it comes to your drinking, you don't have to hit rock bottom to want something different, and you don't have to do it alone. This Naked Mind blends neuroscience, psychology, and self-compassion to help you stop relying on willpower and start creating real, lasting change. No shame, no labels, and no rules. Whether you want to take a break, drink less, or stop drinking for good, This Naked Mind has a program that meets you where you are, with world-class coaching and a compassionate, judgment-free community to support you every step of the way. Learn more about This Naked Mind at thisnakedmind.com.
I'll have a lot of people, just because I've shared my story about quitting drinking, I'll have some people reach out to me about, you know, that are struggling to stop drinking, and I tend to lead them with giving them Annie's book. I gave it to someone, and he said, I wish that the cover was different because I had to hide it while I was reading it in a coffee shop. Which is, you know, like Agnes said, I don't want people to know that I'm reading this. I'm like, that's too bad. You know, because, you know, for that, I what's the cover say? I think it says This Naked Mind, but then it says, like, control alcohol under it. And so the fear was that someone might see that, versus me reading Iron Flame. I don't care what people think. I do skip the sex parts and get to the dragons, but whatever. But I did think that's interesting that, you know,
that shame is so deep in we as a society that we have to hide what we're reading just in an attempt to understand. I mean, putting it right up there with people not reading, I don't know, Playboy in public. Or something. I mean, that is just really, really too bad. And I never really thought about that.
I think it's judgment. I don't even know. Like, I think the judgment, it's like everyone's so, like, I'm afraid. I don't want to be judged. So again, it's like, but you can't stop that from happening. Like, everyone's going to think whatever they want to think anyways. So how are we judging ourselves? Because if we're worried about judgment, that means we are judging ourselves. So we feel there's something wrong with that actual book that we're reading. It's making us uncomfortable. So it's like, okay. What is that?
And what meaning is that? What meaning or thought is all of that arising from? And that's part of what we're all doing in our adventures, right? Is trying to help people understand in professional and personal environments that that kind of internal judgment and shame is not the way.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because if I see somebody reading something like, I was the way that somebody was reading Let Them by Mel Robinson. I was like, oh, you're reading that. What do you think of it? And like, if I see somebody reading Gabor Mate, or if I see, The Joy of Being Sober, I love it. I'll make a point of saying, oh wow, it's a really good book. What do you think? So
that's awesome. Yeah. And that's what should be celebrated.
But those ones, interesting enough, those have a positive judgment, if you want to call it.
Right.
It's not judgment, but people, when they see that, they look at it as a positive thing. It's the addiction ones that are not that. That's where that whole feeling of, ooh, there's something wrong with that, or you've got a problem, or, oh my God, I can't have someone look at that. Or if there is something, again, let's say there's something really sexual about the book that we're reading, that kind of stuff, then it's like you're hiding that. So there's this, because like Let Them is, everyone talks about it. Like there's no, that's right. Like, oh, good for you. Let's chat.
Do you think there would be a judge? I was just thinking though then about like Alan Carr,
right.
That he's given up smoking. If somebody had been reading that, I don't.
Well, not now, but many years ago, probably. Right. So again, it's like years ago. Now smoking, like there's nothing wrong with being a non-smoker. Like that's totally socially acceptable. Like it's turned around. So, but I'm sure, I don't know, years ago how people felt about that and how they would have felt.
And it almost seems like it's like getting a book is almost the first step versus reaching out to someone for help, right? So I think, and we've seen this in Annie's life, right? Like the book sold the 1 million copies first, right? Before people found her programs or whatnot. Alan Carr's probably the same way. It's like, I want to quit smoking. I'm not, and so I might hide it. I might buy it and read it at home. I don't want to tell anyone else. I don't want to reach out to someone who maybe has had the experience that could help me because I'm embarrassed or I feel that shame, right? Like some of these books seem like almost the first step of like, I'm gonna see if I can figure it out on my own first, because I don't want to reach out for any help. And to your point on the positive side of things, we've seen that too, and like I think we've seen that the more positive psychology type stuff works too, right? Like that's what we've seen from an addiction standpoint. Sammie, maybe you've seen this. I don't know if the programs that you work within are like that, but like more of the positive psychology, the
compassion,
compassion based type stuff.
That is most. I mean, the rehab that I still work part time at, it's a 12-step rehab, but the focus now is very much on compassion focused therapy. They're doing that is, and it was funny because I was there last night on the night shift, and I could see on the whiteboard that there's lots of inspirational quotes and book recommended readings on the whiteboard, including Annie Grace, This Naked Mind. And I didn't write it on there. That was not me. Yeah. So, and that's at the 12-step rehab, but there's definitely certainly, in my experience where I am, that, that it's getting wider than just that, which is
it's more of the two, not like, I don't know. I don't want to say like hardcore, like this is the way to do it. It's more of just like open your mind type stuff. I haven't read Let Them, but I think that concept makes sense, right? But like some of the more popular self-help books are more, find yourself type thing versus this is the only way,
Yeah. Well, it's like you said earlier, it's about trying to find the one that you relate to. I mean,
right.
Byron Katie is one that I absolutely love.
Sure.
For me, she's just brilliant. It's just so easy. 4 questions, and it kind of gets me out of my own head. when I'm in a funk about something, you know, and because ultimately it's the same sort of thing that they're talking about.
Well, the one that came up for me initially was like Atomic Habits, right? That was a very big one, right? And it's so simple, and people don't want to. I like in my world, I tend to. I'm looking for some answer, right? That's like maybe easy, and I think what a lot of these things do is maybe they present it in an easy word, but like Byron Katie stuff is hard work, right? Like it's a simple process. Atomic Habits is very simple, but when you read it, you're like, well, shit, you know. So it is one step at a time. It's like, yeah, like, and some of it's gonna suck. It's like we want this big answer to be like, here's how to solve all of your problems. I was just talking to my therapist about that this morning. Of like, I'm looking for some like, here's who you are inside and the exact path of your life that you should follow. I'm like, unfortunately, right? You're probably not going to find that.
That's the Mark Manson's book, in it, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. That's another one that kind of...
That's a great book too.
Yeah.
And I think so much of it is that we have been, again, socialized from the time we were wee tots to truly believing that there is, in fact, a magic bullet for every problem. And your quest is to just find that bullet. And you see it in marketing up the wazoo, right? Including, by the way, alcohol as a magic bullet to get you a partner, get you a good job, you know, get you happy. And the lesson is exactly what you're saying, Brian. There is none. There is no magic bullet, and that's a fundamental myth.
Do you think so? This was interesting today, to this point of when I kind of, you know, I kind of realized that, hey, this path that I was on, you know, even though it led to, say, success by all terms, and you know, I had the marriage, I had the money, I had the stuff that you say would make you happy, and then to realize that it's not. And I kind of went down in this path then to where it's like, okay, let's figure things out. Now, it seems like this is what I've been thinking about a lot lately is I've been following a similar path of a similar chase to find this new thing, right? Which is very similar to what the path I was on before. You know what I mean? Like instead of just being present and I'm again keeping myself busy with this pursuit of other self-helpy and find myself and type stuff, right?
That's the external, isn't it? It's because we look for stuff there to thinking it's going to make us happy. And ultimately, none of it does. Like, funny enough, I saw a clip with Will Smith the other day, and he was saying about people talk about, you know, the low, you know, being at your lowest, and he said, but you can experience that, the problem of being really high when you've literally got everything, but none of it makes you happy. You know, you've got your rock bottom, if you like, and obviously financially it's a difference, but in terms of how you feel inside, when you've literally got everything and none of it's fulfilling.
Yeah, I was thinking about it as like, because what he actually told me, he's like, you know, you got bored, but then you started down this path and got unbored chasing again. It was just kind of a different chase, right? And you're like, isn't that interesting? Of like, so I'm almost think I need to kind of come back and learn to figure that boredom out again, because there was a lot more to learn. You know, I kind of like, oh, there's the answer. And I started again chasing shiny things. And I quickly learned, not quickly, it's been like 4 years. I'm like, oh, that's also not necessarily it, right?
Isn't it also partly finding restoring some sort of balance? Because, you know, we are nomads by nature. Mm-hmm. And so we want to keep moving. We don't want to be stagnant and stuck in the muck either. And so, to your point, yes, we all have to learn. A huge challenge for me to sit in boredom. I am not good at it. But to balance that with the quest for ongoing knowledge. So I think it's a both and, isn't it?
I've always, well, not always, for a while I've thought, oh, it would be great to just live kind of, you know, somewhere where it's just really peaceful and no internet and da-da-da-da. And obviously I went to Bali recently and we had sort of an enforced day of, because my daughter got quite badly sunburned, so just needed to stay inside the room in the aircon. So it really would, I mean, and that was the plan for going to this particular place, that we would literally just have a couple of days of really not doing much because we've been moving around crazy every couple of days. But it was only because it was enforced that I actually had to sit there, and hence that's when I read the book for the day, and literally just like, and it was like, whoa, it was interesting so I actually, what I think I really would like is not necessarily true. And I've realised that my brain needs a certain level of stimulation, otherwise I find it in an unhealthy way.
Was that day hard for you, Sammie?
It was to start. I mean, I got up at 6:30 and went and did a yoga class, like as the sun was rising, overlooking the sea. So that was fabulous. Although, my God, I was like, what? And everyone was like half my age and fabulous. And of course, I was late. Well, not late, but arrived at the last minute. So I'm right at the front, and I'm like, you know, all those thoughts go on in your head, and I'm like, just do it. You're here. You don't know anybody, and it was amazing. But then I was up at 6:30 in the morning. So then I was like, right, okay, so okay.
Yeah.
But actually, I really enjoyed reading the book. I haven't read, like I say, a fictional book probably for about 5 years, you know, and then there was something really satisfying about finishing the book. And then there was a lovely little pool, and that was the only time as well that it rained, but it was really warm. So I went swimming in the pool whilst it was raining, but it was really warm. So that was really cool. But yeah, I've realised that actually, even though I think I want complete peace and quite, you know, this sort of blissful state, no, I actually do need. It's a both and, isn't it? Like you say, you know, I wouldn't do very well if I was just had no stimulation going on.
Yeah, but I think it's learning, it's knowing about how much of that you need.
Yeah.
Like maybe for you, it's a half an hour out of the day you need that peacefulness, and that's all you need. Where somebody else needs 4 hours out of the day. So it's, you know.
Yeah.
Again, there's no recipe as to what that looks like. But I also find with books, it's again, when you reread them, you learn something new, something different in it. I don't know if I could say that about watching the movies themselves. I tend to sort of still see the same thing. But with the books, again, everything's in front of us, and it's what we're able or willing to actually see at that moment, and it's different every single time that we do it, right?
So I honestly started reading again in 2020 when I was bored, and the reason that happened, so I'm talking about more how I distracted myself with books, because I made a rule, because my phone was one of my biggest distractions, and I made a rule that I was going to put my phone away at 8 p.m. every night. But what that made me do is then my options were like write, read, sit, you know, and and I you know, sit was hard. So sometimes I used the books almost as another distraction. And I think that's what we were kind of talking about, even with Sammie, where you're like, I went to a yoga class. I found myself doing some of that stuff. I'm like, I'm bored, so I'm going to do something. It's healthy, so it's better, I guess. But it still sometimes can get, for me, as another shiny object that I'm just distracting myself from, you know? So even these good things like books and yoga and working out can sometimes even be like man, I just don't want to sit.
Yeah. It's that human being thing, isn't it? We don't
exactly.
Like the doing, not the being.
It's crazy.
I read Michael Singer, The Surrender Experiment. I'd read like The Untethered Soul and Living Untethered, which I love as well. But I read his Surrender Experiment, and my goodness, the amount of hours. I mean, literally hours and hours and hours that he would sit and meditate for, and I'm just like.
And that's so interesting to me, yeah.
We went for a treatment just before I left, and it was a 2-hour treatment, and I think it was about an hour that I was trying to not speak for. And they would give it, and I'm honestly, and then when she put the final thing on, it was like this cucumber wrap thing, and I literally lost it and started giggling, and my daughter was next door, there was a curtain, and she just went, are you feeling like a cucumber slug by any chance? And I was quiet. And I think part of it was because I literally hadn't spoken. I'd been trying to be quiet for an hour, and it was just hilarious to me.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's...
A cucumber slug. That's
Yeah.
I know, that's beautiful.
Yeah, it's a lovely image. It was a lovely massage, but yeah.
I think my biggest takeaway was like everything else in this, like kind of what you see with book lists, like, right? Like you got to find your own lane, even in like what you like reading, right? Like I never would have guessed that I would end up in I used to always just be like, no, that sci-fi fantasy shit isn't for me. And now it's the only thing I read, you know, like until you try something, you just have no idea, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting how much judgment we bring into that.
Yeah, I know.
So is that where book clubs started from? Because everyone wanted to explore, or is it to get together for wine?
Probably both and.
Yeah, right?
When I was in residency, no, it was when I was a chief resident and then into fellowships, one of my other chief partners started a book club because when you're in medical training, you basically don't read fiction ever. And so she started a book club with the idea that we're going to read forced fiction, forced upon you.
Yeah.
And we'll allow a month to read a book, but it's going to be fiction, period. And no shop talk allowed. And we did only invite people, you know, from within our hospital. But by God, that went on for a number of years, and for all I know, it's still going on. And for us, it truly was not up in those days for me. It wasn't about the wine. It was about the structure of being forced to read things I wouldn't necessarily choose for myself. I
love it.
Especially at that time. So I had a great time with them.
That's a great point, because to Agnes's point as well, like you'd get stuck in a rut, right? I never would have known that I like this because I never would have picked it up.
Yep.
Exactly. Hey, that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. If something we said resonated, made you laugh, or made you think, we'd love it if you share it with someone who might need it too. And if you're curious about going alcohol-free or just ready to feel more connected to yourself, check out This Naked Mind. Annie's work brought us all together, and we're so grateful for the impact it's had. On that note, a big thank you to Annie Grace and This Naked Mind for making this podcast possible. We'll see you next time on This Naked Chat.